Hello, everybody. As you all come in, we'll give it just a couple of minutes before we kick off officially. But the recording is going. And thank you for being here. Okay. So hello, and thank you for joining us for this Hill and Archives Month panel discussion. My name is Joshua Youngblood, and I am the Instruction and Outreach Unit Head in Special Collections, and I'm going to serve as moderator for today's program. You can see other people on our panel already too, and I'll introduce them in just a second. But I want to talk through a couple of, as we say, housekeeping tips for Zoom, but just some tips and some things to keep in mind for today's discussion. So first of all is that this is being recorded. So if you have friends and neighbors that weren't able to make it today, but they registered, they will be able to get the link, and we are also going to post it on YouTube within the next couple of days. We ask that everyone who is not a panelist, please keep your video and sound off. And so our co-moderators will be going in and turning off video and sound as needed, but hopefully we can all maintain that etiquette so that our speakers maintain or stay on camera as they are speaking. We encourage you to put questions in the chat though, so please do participate in the chat. The chat is available. It's a little bubble down at the bottom, so you can click on that bubble and it should open up on the side. So as you think of questions, you can go ahead and put it in there. We're gonna hold off on questions until later after we have our discussion, but our moderators will be watching that. Since we will have several speakers today, you might want to change your display to show speakers. So if you've never done this before, on your Zoom screen, if you're seeing all the boxes, the big grid, you can go up to the top where it says view with that little grid button, drop down there and put speaker on, whichever way you prefer. But when you have it on speaker setting, when someone's audio comes on who is a speaker, then it will change and they'll be the focus. That said, we will also be sharing a slideshow at different points today. And so that will just take over the screen when that happens. For a little bit of practice for the chat, I want to put in a little chat here. Make sure that everyone can see it. That is a LibGuide, actually, that my colleague, Catherine Wallach, put together. If you like our historical image backgrounds on our Zoom, aren't they snazzy? You can actually go to this LibGuide and download your own. But just, I wanted to make sure that you could see the chat and everything too. But these are actually images from our special collections that have been digitized and are available on our digital collections on the library's website. So as I mentioned, Catherine Wallach provided those. She will also be serving as moderator. And then Catherine Wallach and Kara Flynn will be watching the chat as we go through. And then we'll also be toggling people's mute and video as needed. Before I go much further, I'd like to offer some thanks to a few people. I'd like to give thanks to our Associate Dean of Special Collections, Lori Burrell, who is on the call, as well as the entire outreach team from Special Collections for making this event possible. That's Kara Flynn, Melanie Griffin, Virginia Siegel, Catherine Wallach, and I'd also like to thank Kelsey Lippard, our Director of Communications, for helping us get the announcements out for all of this. And there are other people on this call who probably helped and will be helping in the future. And so thank you in case I didn't thank you enough already. So before introducing the panelists, we're honored to have our Dean of Libraries, Jason Battles, with us, and he's going to offer you a welcome. So, Dean Battles.
Thanks, Joshua. So Archives Month, which is one of the reasons this program is here, is part of a national initiative intended to draw attention through programs to the importance of archives and the work archivists do to steward the collections that they hold. In recent years, Special Collections has hosted events that highlight new acquisitions, an author's book project, the history and future of student publications on campus, and last year, an examination of the role our individual biases have on cultural heritage work itself. The genesis of this afternoon's program came out of a desire to highlight how units on campus have partnered with Special Collections and conducted research in support of their respective events and initiatives around the university's 150th anniversary. Special Collections works with hundreds of researchers every year, seeking to better understand a variety of topics and issues. As part of the flagship land-grant institution in our state, We take a lot of pride in how our faculty, staff, and students utilize these records. These collections are not meant to gather dust on a shelf. I think that's kind of the image people get of archives sometimes. Rather, they're meant to be used to create both scholarship and understanding. Whether that's the research of an honors college class taught by our now interim chancellor, Charles Robinson, to understand the Black student experience, or for the university museum curator to develop an exhibit in collaboration with our own university archivist. I encourage you to imagine how you might incorporate our collections into a class assignment, a thesis, a book project, or an artistic performance. And I want to thank you all again for being part of our program this afternoon. And now I'll turn things back over to Joshua to introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you for those great remarks about Archives Month. And I just want to emphasize that Archives Month is just one of the opportunities we have throughout the year to celebrate what we do. This year's theme is particularly apt. So Archives Month is archivists from around the country find different ways to celebrate, and this year's theme is the power of collaboration. And I think all of the speakers are going to share some of that. I'm going to share my screen real quick and talk through a couple other things. So like every department and a member of the U of A community, this year, the libraries have been engaged in celebrating our sesquicentennial, or the 150th anniversary of the university. And over the past several months, librarians and archivists have worked on our digital services unit, digital services unit to share even more historical records through lots of new digital collections. I mentioned earlier that you could have a background image from our special collections. But I also encourage you, if you have a chance, to look at some of these great projects that we've been unveiling over the last couple of years. Just to name a few, there's the Campus Life and Life on the Hill, which is the sesquicentennial celebration. The fact that all of our yearbooks are digitized now and available. The entirety of the Arkansas Traveler is now available. And then we've been adding more and more pictures from the university's picture collection, as well as some other specific exhibits we have, such as Commence and Go Forth, which is commencement addresses, Spaces of Faces, which gives you a little bit of background on the buildings on campus. And so we have a wealth of digital collections. And one of these, of course, is Bad Times, which we'll hear a little bit more about later. If you've passed through the library in the last couple of weeks, you might have seen some of our exhibits. So like some of our speakers, we've been finding ways to make visitors in our facility feel welcome, and to also share a little bit of our understanding and interpretation of the 150th anniversary. On the left here, you see Home on the Hill, which is an exhibit curated by our university archivist, Amy Allen, who also has been instrumental in a lot of those digital collections I was just talking about. This is in the Walton Reading Room. Fantastic exhibit that'll be up for several more weeks or a couple of months, I think, for the rest of the semester. And then on the right is Ex Libris, which looks a little bit closer at the history of Mullins Library. Well, the libraries, even before we came to Mullins, from Ball Walker to our current facility, with some artifacts and some other things from our collections that was put together by Kat Wallach. So now on to our panelists. And I'll introduce our panelists, and I also have some slides from each of them. And so as they speak, hopefully they'll pop up, and we'll adjust as we go. So our panelists today, first we have Laurel Lamb, who is Curator of Education and Engagement at the University of Arkansas Museum. There she cares for the collections and leads outreach efforts. Lamb earned her graduate degree in heritage preservation with a concentration in public history from Georgia State University in Atlanta. In her years within the museum field, she has worked at a variety of institutions, from a natural history museum to a corporate archive to an art museum, and she has a special interest in collections, accessibility, and engagement, as well as material culture studies. Then we'll have Jennifer Ogle, who is a botanist and collections manager of the University of Arkansas Herbarium. Jennifer is the co-author of Trees, Shrubs, and Woody Vines of Arkansas, and co-editor of Atlas of the Vascular Plants of Arkansas, which is a really, really great book if you haven't seen it yet. Jennifer holds a master's degree in biology from the University of Arkansas and has worked as a contract botanist and consultant for several government agencies, private companies, and nonprofit organizations in Arkansas. In her spare time, Jennifer serves on the boards and committees of organizations focused on urban land conservation and the protection of native plants and plant communities. We'll then hear from Terrell Page, who's a junior honors college fellow majoring in English education and minoring in Spanish. Terrell attended the Bad Times Honor Forum in fall 2020 and contributed to the Walking History Tour and created as the course's final project. And Terrell also enjoys curating endless Spotify playlists, dissecting the representational politics of children's cartoons, and fanboying over the new Super Smash Bros. Ultimate roster. And Terrell also gets my prize for best bio of the day. And then we'll hear from Lesley Speller and Lisha Estes, who are student engagement specialists with the TIPS team and Global Campus. They have been with the university for a combined total of 35 years, and their specialty is the use of emerging technologies in education and innovative learning practices. And so first up, well, each of our speakers is going to provide an introduction and to talk about how they've been working with our collections. And I'd like to ask Laurel Lamb to go first.
Okay, thank you so much, Joshua, for your introduction, and thank you for having me here today. So yes, I work with education and engagement here at the museum, and really the most recent project that has led me to get involved with special collections materials was the 150th anniversary exhibit that we put into Silas Hunt Hall. The image on the screen there, that is our exhibit case that we maintain in Silas Hunt Hall. We change it out about once a year. And so this year it's all about celebrating the 150th anniversary exhibit. And this was done kind of in conjunction with Amy Allen. As Joshua mentioned, the exhibit that Special Collections has up right now in Mullins Library in the Walton Reading Room. So they were put up, and they're both currently on display together in separate locations on campus. It was done just in time for the campus-wide Come As You Arkansas event as a way to allow people to experience university history across campus. And so, there's a couple things from the museum on display in the Mullins Library exhibit, and then there's several things on display in our exhibit from Special Collections that you guys were kind enough to allow us to utilize, and they made our exhibit a stronger, richer exhibit that would definitely be different if we didn't have those materials. And so these are, thank you so much. I knew I would forget to mention to move it. So these are a couple of those images here that are on display there. So the one on the left is also my background. My head keeps getting in the way of. It's an early photograph of the museum, an exhibit we had here at the museum in Old Main, which is where we originally started. We started in Old Main, as many departments on campus have. And so part of the exhibit is talking about the museum's history on campus, as well as the library's history on campus. And then the one on the left is a Black Americans for Democracy news issue that is part of our student publications section that hopefully I'll get to talk about in a little bit as well. Next slide. So ignore the picture on the right. I'm not going to talk about that today. But the two pictures on the left, I wanted to emphasize as kind of a side note to some other things I do with Special Collections that I've done kind of throughout the years of my being here. So Special Collections, especially the digital collections, are really helpful for me to reference in terms of when I find an object and I want to know just a little bit more about it that we just can't find in our own records. We don't have that detail in our own records. And so I often reference the digital collections to kind of find that information and give more depth to that object. And so I just want to quickly tell you about the lamp. It's one of my favorite objects in the collections. It's so funky and bright. And I wrote a blog post about it for our museum's website, actually during COVID. So it was great that I could access the digital collections during COVID. And basically, we knew it's from Vol Walker Hall when the library was in Vol Walker Hall from the 30s through the 60s. but our records didn't say exactly when the lamps were in the Woolwalker or where they were located. And so I did some searching around on the digital collections, and I came across 2 images. There's another one that's not in this presentation, but I came across 2 images that actually feature the lamps in the pictures, and I was so excited. And it might seem kind of small, like, oh, it's just a lamp that you found in a picture, but it adds that much more context to it, right? Like we have the actual lamp today, but we don't. Being able to see the picture means that we're able to kind of see how it fit within the larger design of the space, and we can see the people who used it in that space. And so it just brings life to the object that we wouldn't otherwise have. And as an aside, this picture is also in our 150th anniversary exhibit. We couldn't fit the actual lamp in the case because it was too big, so it's just a picture of the lamp, but the 2 together work really well in the case. So that's me.
Thank you very much. Next up, I would like to hear from Jennifer Ogle, please.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here, and thank you, Joshua, for inviting me to be part of this. It's really exciting. I am, as has been mentioned, I'm a botanist and collections manager of the herbarium. A lot of my job involves just managing the collection, making sure it's well preserved, kept at the proper temperature, insects aren't eating the specimens, things like that. Also, I do quite a bit of field work to increase the amount of specimens that we have in our collection. But another part of my job is outreach, and to make the collection accessible to researchers. When researchers come in here, they're automatically excited. They're always happy to be here because they know they're going to find something that they've been looking for, or we've already communicated and I have the specimens ready for them for research. So that's not a problem. But when I introduce the herbarium, well, actually, when I say what I do, that I work at the herbarium, I get a lot of confused looks, first of all. A lot of people don't know what this place is. And so when people come in here, just people who aren't researchers, I get a varied mix of responses. I've seen confusion, joy, elation. A couple of weeks ago, a woman came in and was just overjoyed to be here, and she'd never been in a herbarium before. And then I've even seen disappointment in people's faces. So it's really important to me to find connections between these specimens that you see behind me, these dead plants glued to paper, and connections to the people who collected them and the stories that can be told. And really those stories mostly exist in special collections. And so I did an open house as part of the Come As You Are Arkansas event on September 10th to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the university. I partnered with the entomology department. They have their arthropod museum right next door to me, just down the hall. And so I made as the theme this 150th anniversary, and it fits really well because the herbarium itself is 146 years old. So I have photographs from almost the entire history of the U of A, well, special collections, and I have these photographs between the 2 of us that I could put together and do a chronological walk through the herbarium and show people the history of this herbarium. It's almost as long as the university itself. So I feel like special collections has helped me bring to life some of these people who lived and these plants that are definitely not alive. And Joshua, I'm going to talk about this in a little while.
Oh, sorry.
In a different part. No worries.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So next up will be Terrell Page, if you'd like to speak with us, Terrell. And I'm going to stop share here.
So, can you pull up the
Yep.
just the exhibit? Okay.
Sure will. There we go.
There we are. My name is Terrell Page. I'm just what was it, last fall, I think. Last fall we had this class taught by Chancellor Robinson about the basically the Black experience at the U of A back in the 70s. We started a little tiny bit with, Silas Hunt and everything, and then moved up to 70s and contextualized it and everything because he's a historian by trade. And as part of the culminating thing of the project, the culminating project of the course, every student had to contribute one entry into a larger curated, like a history walk. I always thought of it as kind of like a Pokemon Go, except history. So kind of like Magic School Bus-ish kind of thing, because it was on Google, kind of on Google Maps-ish. And we walked it. We walked the length of the tour in spring, and now it's on the Honors College website as a thing. The picture that I found that we were most proud of is that one on the left with the Omega Psi Phi fraternity practicing steps or probably strolls. I'm not part of it. I'm part of Phi Beta Sigma, but it's another Black fraternity. My exhibit in this was about Black fraternity life in general, and on the campus of U of A, because a lot of these, it was a Black history course, so I knew there was going to be a lot of trauma. But after hearing everything about 2020, by the end of the year, I personally wanted to find some sort of spark of joy. I knew they were students here. They had to have found some way to find joy, be it intramurals, be it extracurriculars, be it Greek life. And so I covered Greek life, and unexpectedly found it tied to both of those things, the intramurals and the extracurriculars. I don't know if the picture is here, but could you scroll down a little?
Mm-hmm. That's it.
I don't know if this specific picture is in here, but this is the whole, just a rundown of the whole exhibit. Mine's there. The first Black fraternity on campus, Omega Psi Phi, was begun by BAD students, or Black Americans for Democracy students, in 1974. Today, Black students remain just about 4.5%-ish of the campus population, so they continue to need ways of establishing community, preserving culture, and having a voice. It was a good idea, or at least my favorite part of this whole thing, that we were encouraged to bring the past to the present, without presentism, of course, but at the same time, just bringing it there. I guess that's about it.
Okay, you already gave us a lot to think about. That's awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to share the link out to the walking tour site in a little bit as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And there's the YouTube video too.
Yep. Yeah.
Because it's not with the Clio part. It's its own link. I guess I'll send that too.
Awesome. In fact, I will actually drop that in the chat right now. The Honors College page, if anyone wants to go take a look. Okay, and last, I'd like to hear from Lesley Speller and Lisha Estes, and I am going to share the slideshow again and go back over to your slide.
Hi, I'm Lesley Speller, and this is Lisha Estes. We're from the TIPS team and from Global Campus. And
yeah, so what we did is we created two projects. We created an online escape room, and we also created a virtual museum of distance education. The museum is just to showcase distance education all the way back from the beginning through now.
And we actually went into the special collections to find pieces for our museum and to give it more context for our escape room. So many, if not most, of the things that we found that you see in our virtual museum actually came from special collections. So we found, if you see BC Riley there on the picture on the left, he was actually the very first director of distance education here at the University of Arkansas. And someone kept boxes of his materials, and it is located in special collections. And we went through there, we found so much fun stuff like letterheads and notes, and we really liked "For a Greater Arkansas" was the motto back then, and I think that really carries through to today. And do you want to tell them a little bit about how we did it in Frame VR?
Yeah, we created a 3D space using framevr.io and sort of, well, I mean, it's a virtual museum, but we use the objects because we wanted not just the information, but the look of it, and to see the actual items, to really get that connection and engagement that people, don't normally just go to look for and see. But in the context of the story we were trying to tell, which was the history from the very beginning of distance education through now and beyond, then just having these actual images just really tied everything together, and it made it just that much more connected and important.
And there's everything from stuff from the beautiful digital collections. We love the digital collections. They're like, how some people fall into Instagram and like can't get out. Like, I feel like that way about the digital collections in the library. They're amazing. And I just fell down a rabbit hole and can't stop looking at all the pictures. But we actually looked into the yearbooks and found some really great history there. From the 50th anniversary one, especially, you see that on the wall there. That was the 50th year of the university. And there's some stuff about the starting of distance education with correspondence courses at the University of Arkansas. And it just really, it really opened up the history of our organization in ways that we didn't know at all about. And we even found one of the things that distance education did was provide courses to people around the state, but also to women's clubs around the state. And we actually found a box of scrapbooks from the from the special collections. And there were just so many amazing things in there. Some of it was just notes to each other and little things, but it really made us feel connected to the people, and in a way that just wouldn't have been possible without that.
And it just kept that common thread of removing barriers to education, and how that has been the case all the way from the beginning, and finding new ways to do it and new ways to make education more accessible.
And our escape room, we made it in HTML and H5P, which is a way basically to make it a little more interactive. And we used the stuff that we learned from special collections to create some of that material as well. And we'll provide you guys with links to both of those, so you can take a look at them after the presentation if you would like to. That's
awesome. Thank you so much. Anything else to add?
Nope, that's about it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop share here so we can all talk for a second. But I want to pause for just a second and give credit to Martha Anderson, who I didn't name check earlier, but Martha Anderson is our head of our digital services unit in our library, and she manages our digital collections. So as you hear people talk about how accessible they are and how rich they are, it's a collaborative process, but Martha Anderson and her team really, really do a great job. And so I'm glad to hear now, as I'm going to hear more of, how useful and well-received those digital collections are, and how much they're going to get even better into the future. So again, I would ask somebody, if you have, ask everyone on the call, if you have some questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. But I have several questions that I would like to ask you all, because I'm very interested in everything that you're doing. And I'm going to ask some questions really about your experience as researchers, but also about how your experience as members of our campus community. And Special Collections really sees itself as part of this community, a community of learning, where we're trying to make these things accessible. So I'm going to ask questions along both those lines. I would like everyone, all the panelists that want to answer, please feel free to answer. Although I do have a couple of questions I really want to get a little bit, I'm gonna ask people to respond to first. And my first question, and Terrell, I'm gonna ask you to respond to this one if you feel comfortable first, and then everyone else chime in. So in this sesquicentennial year, I'm finally to the point where I can say that, almost through the year. In the sesquicentennial year of the university, Special Collections chose the theme of This Hill for our Archives Month discussion, because we're hoping to hear other perspectives from people about how they're engaging with the legacy of our university. But also, I wonder if you all, and Terrell, I'll start with you, can share a bit about how you view the significance of 150 years. Does that number mean a lot to you? And has your understanding or response to that 150 year changed?
Well, one of the first classes I took here was history, American history from 1877 to the present. So around that time is just a really pivotal moment for the university in general and education. And then within words, but then with the bad times class, I'd always heard about Black History Month and Black history with other things as well, but never specifically at this university until they offered that class. With the exception of my university perspectives class, because I kind of lucked out. But other than that, it was nice to see it. Just because in special collections, whenever I go, like, I don't know that there's this history and then there's also Black history in the university. Like, I don't think, oh, wow, this too is University of Arkansas kind of thing. Because it's just not really what my family really thought of when I first thought, hey, I'm going to U of A. But it's nice to have a class like that because it fits in that whole 150th story too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Does anyone else like to respond to that question? Can you share a little bit about how you view the significance of the 150th year? And maybe has your appreciation changed through your work with special collections?
Yes. I was 2 years away from being born when the 100th anniversary was celebrated, and I probably won't be alive when the 200th anniversary is celebrated. So this is the big one for me, right? And it's easier to say, sesquicentennial is easier to say than however you pronounce the 175th. So that's a really bad one. I can't even pronounce it. But I think that, you know, it's significant. It's 150 years. It's a big deal, you know. But also personally, it has made me dig a little deeper about the herbarium, about the history of this place and how it connects to the university at large. And so I think I've personally and professionally benefited from this anniversary happening right now. Yeah.
I'd also like to add on to that. It's the same here. Being able to access photos like this one from the museum's early history. This is actually the earliest known photo that I know of a museum exhibit here from our department. And so being able to kind of explore that history more and consider where we've come from and where we're at now and where we're going in the future has been really significant for the anniversary for me.
I know that for us, it's brought a much larger understanding of our place, of our unit's place in history and how its names have changed and location has changed and a lot of things about it have changed, but the mission has always been the same. And finding ways to accomplish that has always been something that a lot of effort and ingenuity has gone into, and that really means a lot to me personally. I think it's just such a good thing.
And reaching students who are not on the Hill, the ones who couldn't be here and couldn't make it for whatever reason. For instance, there was a girl who contracted polio, and that's in our virtual museum, and she lost the ability to walk and thought she'd never be able to finish her high school degree or finish her university degree, but she was able to through correspondence courses, and then went on to have a full life after that because of that. And I think that's just really special.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for inverting the title of our presentation so well, because it's not just the Hill, because we think of it in this iconic way, or maybe we think of the history in these big moments and monuments, but it's also about the students and about the people that we're serving. My next question, I would like to actually, Lesley and Lisha, to direct this one at you first, and I'm again ask everyone to add anything if you'd like. And this is me as a kind of a research archivist, somebody who is really interested in how people do their research. So that's my bias in crafting this question. But for each of you, your research was tied to an event or project. So you had something in mind that you were bringing to the collections. So in what ways did you target your research before getting into the collections? And then what sort of preparation did you do before accessing the ArcFlow and MRAR collections?
So we actually began with some stuff that is being submitted to special collections that actually was owned by our unit. They are very old programs from the distance education courses in the 1920s and 30s. And so we started there and got a great amount of awesome material. And then from there, we searched through your records on the online database and found anything we could related to distance education. And that is how we found our way into what we were looking for.
And we wanted, not just the information in those objects, the books. These are bulletins stacked together and bound, but we also wanted the 3D representation of them in our space. And so since one of our specialties is technology and innovation, we used an iPad Pro to 3D scan those stack of books into a 3D model. And it's just so nice to have that book texture. Is you can't always just go in and touch books. You don't do that. But we had the opportunity to have them in our space and light them and scan them with an iPad and get that texture with the scuffs and the scratches, and just have you can really see it there in that room, in that space. And I really like that connection as well.
Anyone else want to pick that one up? Oh yeah, go ahead.
In the class for bad times, we were just encouraged to read. We were encouraged to read every single one of the entries in the digital collection of bad times, since there were only like maybe 12 to 20, I can't remember. But each one was maybe a few pages. It was just a little newspaper. So it was encouraged, but it was really kind of mandatory. Because everybody read the newspaper itself so that you can have a background of what to study in the first place.
Yeah, there's a difference between having something assigned and something's like, oh, I have an idea to go do something. But both those answers from Lesley, Lisha, and yours, Terrell, are important, because you have to be well versed in the subject matter in order to get to the collections. But then also you're inspired to do something, and there's something that leads you along. Anyone else want to talk about that prep you did before accessing?
Sure, I'll chat about it. So Amy and I were both on the university, the sesquicentennial, I don't know, I practiced beforehand, I just don't think I got it right. The sesquicentennial University History Working Group for the upcoming anniversary. And so our exhibit was actually based on brainstorming done within that working group, and kind of narrowed down to specific themes. So there's the university's beginnings in its early days, the student life, campus departments, and athletics. And so that was what really started to help narrow down what direction I wanted to go in with my research and the project. So it was, and then I started with our collections to see what we had in our collections, since that's primarily what the exhibit is made of, both what worked thematically as well as visually was appealing, as well as physically what would actually fit in that one exhibit case and what the object's condition was. And then I stepped back to see what gaps there were in the exhibit, and weaknesses there were. And so one example is for the student life section. I covered student publications to talk about student voice on campus. And in our collections, we have a 1912, a really great 1912 X-ray pennant. And we also have a very small, very small archival collection here as well. So we already had a University Weekly copy to share, but we didn't have any copies of the Black Americans for Democracy, unfortunately. And so, but it's a really important publication to talk about for campus history. And so it was an obvious gap that needed to be filled. And that's where I turned to special collections to access that. And the other kind of example is, some of the photos that we have like the lamp and the picture of the lamps in their space, what physically worked best together. From there, I just utilized the digital collections and kind of consulted with Amy and Catherine about what I wanted to use.
Yeah, I had to cheer the X-ray there because I'm such a big fan of X-ray, and I've seen that pennant now because of the exhibit, and I'd never seen that pennant before. So that was just, I was like, oh wow, when I saw it in real life for the first time.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites too.
Yeah. Jennifer?
I feel like mine was very straightforward, the path to special collections, because we have a botanist in the state who was a graduate student here. He did his PhD dissertation in the 70s, and he has designated himself, and we're all very grateful, as our, botanical genealogist. So he's kept track of everybody to a certain degree. He writes remembrances in the academic journal, in our state academic journal, when a big botanist player dies. So I knew the big players of the herbarium because of that research. So I had names and dates and a little bit of information in between, and some information about them also. And so it was pretty straightforward. I just made a list of all these people that I wanted to research and started looking online. And thankfully, one of our former directors, he was here in the 20s through the 50s. He was a meticulous record keeper, and he was a great corresponder with many different people. And all of his correspondences, his papers and everything, his wife kept, and then she donated them to special collections in the 80s. Well, no, I don't think that was the 80s. Maybe. Have you been around that long? I think it was like 86.
Yeah, no, we've been around since 67.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah,
okay.
so we definitely could have gotten those.
I'm so not in the know about that. Sorry.
I had a little note to say that when I first started. We've been here since 1967.
Yeah. I don't know if I would have heard it, but there it is. I'm glad to know. She donated all these papers, and so he corresponded with some of the older botanists and future botanists, and so it's just this great connection that I was able to find. And it is a rabbit hole. As someone already said, it's a rabbit hole. I've only just entered it, and I don't know when I'll come out of it, because there is so much information in special collections for me still to research. I've done just enough to give presentations and do an exhibit, I feel like.
Yeah, and I along those same lines, Jennifer, I was thinking of you for my next question, actually, but no pressure, because you might have already answered it as much as you want to, but because you're doing ongoing research. So you've done projects in here, and you keep coming back to us to add context and depth to your research. And so I also wanted to ask each of you kind of a simple question, but it's one that I know that I've been in here for 10 years and I still run into this. The things that surprise you. So what is the most surprising thing that you've encountered in special collections? And are there items or directions that you encountered that, and this is something I have to do almost every day, that you had to stop? You had to say, oh, I can't go down that rabbit hole. I have to pause and kind of stay on track.
Yes, definitely. There were a lot of surprises, and this is where I think this slide would be useful that I gave to you. I had to narrow it down to one, but I did. And I was, as I was sitting there in the research room at the table, I know I made noises, I gasped, or I just like cried out, like dramatically. I know I did, but because I was so shocked at some of this stuff. So the one I want to talk about is, well, I'm in the world of conservation of plants and natural areas. And this is a conversation that we're just starting to have. We think about diversity constantly. We think about biological diversity. We want to see diverse habitats and ecosystems. Diversity is strength in the natural world, right? Well, we know diversity is strength with people too. And so we're finally having these conversations about a lack of diversity in conservation, in the people composition of conservation, right? For forever, it's always been white men. And now it's a lot of white women too. But and I know in other areas of the country we have more diversity, but in the South it's really lacking. We're getting a little better, but and so with all of that in mind, and we have been having conversations, I'm a part of panels about this. I've been really searching for some diversity with the curators, the directors, or anybody who's been involved. And really it's white men all the way down. That's what it's been. We've never had a person of color as the director. We've never had a woman as the director. I'm here now, I'm in charge, but I'm not the director. I'm the collections manager, and it's very different. It's a very different position. And so one of the times that I did gasp was when I came upon a note in one of the special collections, the university catalogs and special collections. This was the 1879 catalog. And here we have Francis Leroy Harvey on the right in this slide. He was the founder of the herbarium. He was here for 10 years, and he was a really excellent professor, excellent collector. He did us a lot of good in founding the herbarium. He also founded the museum, collected thousands of plants. One of the ways he increased the collections was by offering a cash prize to students, which I don't think we could get away with that today. But he would offer a cash prize of $10 to any student who presented the best collection of 150 Arkansas specimens of Arkansas native, well, they didn't have to be native, but Arkansas species. And as I'm going through this catalog, I see that the Harvey Botanical Prize was given to a female student. And I was just so happy to see it just because of this lack of diversity. And I started digging deeper, and I found that, you know, while we might not have a lot here, we do have a lot of women who have been involved from the very, very beginning. And Miss Holloman contributed 150 specimens to this collection when the whole collection was only about 3,000 in size. So it was pretty significant. And then as I searched more, I found more women involved at that time and later on too. So that was just one of many surprises I found.
Is this one of her specimens?
Oh, there it is. Yeah, I forgot about that. I put that on there. Thanks for remembering. This is one of her specimens. Yeah, we only have a handful left. That's one, this on the end here behind me is also one of hers, a fern.
Oh, wow.
She did an excellent job. And one other thing, she identified everything correctly. A lot of these student specimens, you'll see the name scratched out, and then the curator will just write the right name on top of it. But she got hers right, and that's why she won $10 in 1878. It's kind of a big deal. And yes, I did, while I'm talking, I'll just say I did have to stop many times just because of time. I gave a presentation on this topic yesterday, so I had a deadline. And so there were many, many paths that I had to just stop, because I could spend all day, every day, just reading special collections about this stuff. So yeah, definitely.
Thank you. And as the rare books guy in special collections, I love that little book stamp that's on there, the provenance stamp, University of Arkansas Herbarium. That's fantastic.
I still have it. It's right next to me. I keep it out on display.
Well, I'll have to take a look at that someday.
Yeah, it's a great one.
How about everyone else? Is there something that really was surprising to you, or maybe was that really enticing thing that you had to throw up the stop sign for because you just couldn't go any further?
Well, we can talk a little bit about that. One of the things that we found was a collection from the 1960s, and it was from the distance education director, but it mostly had to do with national security. And so it was all about where to go and what to do in case of a nuclear strike. And like, it really had nothing to do with our research, but we just couldn't stop reading it because it was so interesting. Where they were going to put the students, where they were going to send the Fayettevilleans so they don't feel bad. And yeah,
it was very interesting. And just thinking about the parallel of how like our emergency communications about like COVID-19 and things might be viewed in the future, for people looking back and thinking of kind of different ways that like how we felt about those communications.
Yeah.
And then one minor other thing is that we were looking for something in the student newspaper, and we kept reading this article and nothing made sense. And like, I feel like I would have remembered reading something about this before.
It was the university is moving to Little Rock instead of, and we were like, what?
Makes
Like,
sense.
that never happened. That was never even suggested, was it? And so we read this whole thing, and it started getting weirder and weirder toward the back. And then I looked at the date on it.
April 1st.
It was April 1st, 1970 something, 60
It was
something.
like, so congratulations to all those
they got you.
writers. We were fooled. We were April fooled.
We were April fooled by kids from the 60s.
I guess I could just mention, I mean, as a side note, I believe we have some mineral collections that were also collected through that contest you're talking about, Jennifer. Some of our earliest collections. I already kind of told about my surprise with the lamp. It's very minor, but it was another one of those things where I just like audibly gasped because I was like, oh, there it is, it's our lamp. It's a very exciting day. But there are tons of rabbit holes that I could go down as well, just for general research about objects. And it usually ends up, I just answer the questions I need for whatever it is, the blog post, the social media post, the exhibit, the research inquiry, whatever it might be, because there's so many directions you can go in.
Sure. Well, I have a couple more questions, and hopefully we'll still have time for people to ask questions from the audience as well. So I'm going to, well, I have one that I really wanted to hear from everyone about, and this is about mission. And many of you have talked about mission, and Terrell, you talked about kind of like your idea of what the place was and the thinking you did before you got to the university. And when we were talking earlier about kind of what led you to do research, many of you mentioned that you know, in your professional role, you found these things to be really, really useful. And so that was really directing kind of your area. But so Special Collections seeks to serve the people of the state of Arkansas, researchers from all over the world. And so we really want to meet research needs all the time. And a lot of our collections demand that we kind of look outward. One of the things that we've experienced, I know, within the libraries and special collections celebrating the sesquicentennial, is that how are we going to meet the needs of our the members of our campus community, and how are we going to kind of do both at the same time, kind of a balance of this larger story and larger resources, but also this really important story to us, which is the story of the university. How has your research changed how you see your program's role as a part of the university community? Or for you, Terrell, your role as a student and maybe a future professional that will be in the academic environment or in some other job?
One thing that really stood out to me one time that I heard about special collections, it's kind of something that Lesley and Lisha might have been into probably. When Tesseract started making those historical games, about one of them about the 60s and the other one about that's upcoming actually, called Ivy on the Wire, about the Japanese internment and the Italian prisoners of war in World War II in Arkansas. Because normally when I think about Arkansas history, I don't really see myself in, of course, you know, with the identity thing, but also with just interest, because I'm usually interested in video games and music. And I don't hear a lot about Arkansas in either of those things. But when I heard that that was combining video games and Arkansas history, then I got interested. So as a student, I guess it would be hearing that Special Collections is partnering up with other interested things.
Thank you, Terrell. And I'll say that that's we're doing collaborations all the time. So, you know, this theme I mentioned at the very beginning of power of collaboration, our materials are like going over to Tesseract for that project. And, you know, the cast uses some of our materials as well. And we're always looking for partnerships. So, you know, not to put in too big of a plug or advertisement for Special Collections for everyone else. But yeah, we are open to ideas and brainstorming collaborations. Everyone else, how is how did research kind of affect or impact the way you view your program, or maybe you as an individual, your role on campus?
I think we really learned a lot. I mean, we've always known that we're important to be able to reach people who are not able to come to the university here in Fayetteville. But I think it really, putting faces to those stories really made a huge difference. I think one of the best things about Special Collections is so often in history, we read about these big like life-changing people, and we forget about the smaller people who are just getting through their days and learning on their own in their kitchens. And I think that special collections is really the best place to look for that, because it really contains the stories of the people who might not have made the front page of the newspaper, but the back. And that's cool too.
It just really reinforced the strength and understanding of how important so many things that we do are.
I'm starting to feel more confident in my role as a documentarian as well as a botanist as a result of all this research I've done recently. I think I mentioned it, maybe I didn't, but it makes me feel more connected to the university community as well. The herbarium for a long time has been kind of on the outskirts, and we're physically on the outskirts, and we're always kind of set off away from the main campus. It makes you feel isolated. So it's important to find ways to connect to the community. And I think this is an important way that I've discovered to do that by doing all this research. I plan to put it on a website too, to make it available. That was the initial momentum, or the reason that I wanted to do this type of research a few years ago. But yeah, so just connections. Yeah, mostly.
For me, the research has helped me become a more knowledgeable individual in terms of our own university history collections. And that's really important in terms of doing the best we can to most effectively share our university history collections. It is just understanding what they are and the context behind them. So just helping. I've been here 3 years, so learning the UA's history has been a journey for me, and special collections has been really helpful along the way for that.
Thank you so much for those very thoughtful answers, and for all of the great responses and the depth you provided to these really exciting projects you've been doing, and you kind of helped us understand it. So we had a question about what Tesseract is, and Tesseract is an interdisciplinary program that does, among other things, game design. And Terrell, I'm going to give you a special library reference star because of your very knowledgeable and quick link reference answering here. But yeah, so Tesseract is doing work all the time, but they digitize a lot of materials. So it's digital humanities located in classics. So do some really great stuff. Listening to you all answer that question, listening to you all answer that where do you fit in question reminds me actually something that Dean Battles kind of referenced at the very beginning. The ongoing job or mission of collecting and what that means. So for special collections, that's something that we're still wrestling with. So, we as a part of the libraries and university weren't founded until 1967, but our collections go all the way back to the very beginning. We have books that still have an Arkansas Industrial University stamp on them. And we have, folklore materials and political papers and things from writers from all the way from the early 20th century. But there, of course, is also built-in biases in all of that collecting that's gone. And so one of the things that we think a lot about, and we are actually engaged in some really deep internal thinking about this and planning, is how do we represent the entire state of Arkansas? How do we fulfill our mission while knowing we can't collect everything? We can't bring in everything. So Lesley and Lisha, hearing you bring up the smaller stories that are also in the collections or available, that's really gratifying to hear. That's part of what we're trying to do. Like, it's not just the big names that we all know so well. And it's not just the momentous, 150 years, 50 years, 100 years. It's not those big milestones. It's all the other stories and all the nuance in there that's important too. And also, how do we be fully representational? And how do we help all of our students and researchers that use our materials get a more nuanced and deeper understanding? So thank you for getting to all of that. So we're at 3 o'clock. If there's anyone else that would like to ask a question, please go ahead and do it. And to the panel, if you want to ask a question of somebody else on the panel or to bring up another topic, I encourage you to do so.
Can you do the Tesseract thing with botany?
I bet that they would be open to hearing from you about that.
She could.
Maybe? You think? Yeah.
One of the projects that Special Collections has been doing with CAST as well as other programs across the state, actually, that Terrell, the Japanese internment Italian prisoner of war project, actually is kind of an outgrowth from that in some ways, is or connected, is our Japanese American internment visualization project. So CAST actually has a 3D visualization where we recreated the camp environment. Part of the research that went into that, Jennifer, was actually looking at the gardens, because there's all these World War II era photographs, a lot of the propaganda photographs, but a lot of photographs about the Japanese gardens that were put in place at the camps. And so if you want to go explore CAST 3D project on that called Rising Above, you can actually look at the gardens as well as all the other camps.
How interesting. I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another one of those ways that we're kind of taking the archives, partnering with other archives around the state, and then trying to provide a way for people to interact with it and learn from it in a different way. Okay. Catherine Wallach or Kara, did I miss any questions? And if not,
nope.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who joined us. Again, the recording will be available within the next couple of days on YouTube. And if you register for the event, you'll also get a link directing you to it there. So thank you, and happy Thursday and happy Archives Month.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.